Pastor Nancy already introduced you to what we're going to do today. Just as a reminder, last week we started a 4-week sermon series called The Way. And she started us out by looking at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount from Matthew 5, and taught us about a new way which is available for all people, especially the ones we don't think of first: the meek, the brokenhearted, the hungry, the peacemakers, the merciful, the persecuted, etc. The blessings of God are for everyone, even you and me. Today we'll continue in that chapter, talk about being salt and light. You've probably heard a sermon or two on this, yes? Well, you get another one today, because it's that important. There ought to be some distinguishing characteristics of the one or ones who follow the way. We ought to be salt and light. Indeed, we are asked as God's blessed people to light the way so others can follow too. We are all called to shine for Jesus. I bet you know of a few people in your life who shine their light well. At least I truly hope you do. Without them, we're prone to get a little lost, but with them, we can see a lot better. That's what we're supposed to do for others. It's not actually their light that they shine, but the light that is inside of them, and that light is, of course, Jesus. But before we get to the light, let's talk a little about salt. You can share out loud, because this is a sharing time. Who makes your favorite French fry? And don't tell me the French do. Who? McDonald's, right? Okay. Wendy's. What, say that again. Five Guys. Oh, that's one I hadn't thought about. Yeah. Chick-fil-A. Yeah. Melinda and I have purchased a new house in Souderton when I leave the ministry, and Rick pointed me to probably one of the most important things about relocating, and that is where the best burger shop is. Well, Rick found it out. It's called The Burger Shop, and yes, their fries are good. Yeah. Last year, Rebecca, our fearless youth leader, took the youth on a missions trip of sorts to the surrounding fast food establishments to solve the burning theological question of who had the tastiest fries. I forget who won. I think maybe it was Chick-fil-A. I'm not sure. But I do remember who lost: McDonald's. I thought prior to Rebecca and our youth leaders and our youth heading out to do this most important ministry that they would surely discover that Mickey D's would reign supreme. But life is full of surprises. Here's why I'm bringing this up, regardless of who has the best fries. There's one thing that no fry can be without, no matter where it's from, and still be called a French fry. They would taste terrible without it. They would be worthless. And that's exactly what Jesus said about us. It's what he said. Verse 13, "You are the salt of the earth. But what good is salt if it has lost its flavor? Can you make it salty again? It will be thrown out and trampled underfoot as worthless." Did you know Jesus said we're worthless? Maybe that comes as a surprise. Of course he was talking about if we're not salt of the earth, right? We need to make the world better. We need to be salty. The part about being trampled underfoot is understood from a cultural context. In Jesus' day, salt that did not taste or perform the way salt was supposed to taste or perform was thrown away or used like aggregate stone or gravel. It was put onto pathways and walkways to cut down on loose dirt or mud, and therefore it was literally trampled underfoot. That's why Jesus uses this analogy, why he uses these words. It's kind of like how we throw salt on the ice in the winter, if that mental picture is a little more helpful for you. It's worth nothing more than to be stepped on. That's how important Jesus thought salt was. In comparison, salt that was salty was used for many different purposes. As seasoning, as we just noted, as a preservative, salt was used to preserve meat and fish. It helped to remove moisture and inhibit the growth of bacteria. 3, you used it for medicine. Salt was believed to have healing properties, and it was used to treat a variety of ailments such as sore throats and skin conditions. Ever gargle with salt water? There you go. It had religious and cultural significance as well. Salt was considered a symbol of purity and was often used in religious rituals. And finally, the fifth idea here is that trade was that salt was a commodity. It was traded very heavily. Things are worth their salt, if you will. Salt was very important in ancient times. Jesus said it was very valuable. And the analogy is simple. When we acknowledge and we share our blessings with others, spiritual or otherwise, we are offering something very important and valuable to those around us. That was an important message for those who were listening to Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. As we noted before, those who weren't considered the in crowd or had all the knowledge that the scribes and the Pharisees did, not the religious know-it-alls, or maybe better, those who know little. But these words were for everyone. And what an encouragement it must have been to be able to hear that come from Jesus. When I was in the military, there was a certain type of jargon and slang that was used. How many prior military do we have here today? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of you. You'll recognize some of these. I'm not sure if these are just Marine Corps slang or jargon. I think they're mostly military jargon. But for example, sneakers had a certain term. You didn't call them sneakers in the military. They were called go-fasters. Okay? Your gig line was the alignment of one's shirt placket, or the end of the shirt as you button it, and the alignment of that placket and your belt buckle and your pants that looked clean and professional and disciplined. That was your gig line. And when referring to Marines who had been around a while, they were considered salty. Maybe you've heard that term used before. Not only did they have a bit of a short fuse, they were highly dependable, reliable, trustworthy. They brought a sense of stability and integrity to the Marines around them. I think that's a great way for us to think about who we ought to be as people who follow the way. In short, this verse can be understood as Jesus saying to his followers that they have a special role to play in the world. They must be very careful to maintain their effectiveness. In other words, need to stay salty. Jesus said we're also supposed to be the light to the world. We don't have to work very hard at making this analogy either, do we? Light is meant to reveal things, to bring them out of the dark. That's light's whole purpose. You don't hide it. You don't put it under a bushel or a basket. You let it shine. The prevailing interpretation is that Jesus is saying to his disciples, and by extension all believers, including us, that we have a responsibility to spread the message of God's love and salvation to others. By living a life of blessing that reflects the teachings of Jesus, we are to be a shining example of righteousness and goodness to those who are lost. Just yesterday afternoon, some of the ladies of the congregation and their guests held a ladies' tea. Now, I still contend that we males should have a men's coffee, or better yet, a men's rib dinner. But that's not why I'm mentioning the ladies' tea. The ladies' tea guest was Karen Milkowitz, who is Pastor Nancy's daughter. I think we shared that before, who in addition to that is a wife, a mother, a chemist, a pharmacist, a cancer survivor, and a host of other titles, which also include the author of several Christian fiction books and a weekly blog that she writes under the pen name of Karen Malley. She was invited to share with the ladies how she did it all. How did she manage all of that? Do you know who she gave credit to time after time? I bet you it's no secret, I'm sure. God, right? More important than anything she was or did or is or does is her commitment to being a child of God. And she made that point very clear to all the ladies in attendance yesterday. She is an excellent example of what it means to be a light. Infused throughout her life of writing and working and responsibility and significant challenges is God. She is shining her light. Maybe you know someone like that too. They are great people to be around because they help us see the way. Jesus said we are supposed to be the beacon on the hill, so everyone can see us, so that everyone can see who lives inside of us and receive hope. We can help add direction and purpose as people see the light that originates in us from God and is shown outward from us by the good things we do because of who we are and whose we are. Have you ever been in a completely dark room before? I mean completely light deprived. Not many of us have, but it's unnerving at best, even to be in a room that is mostly dark. But how important is that one light, or that faint glimmer, or whatever it is, just the little bit of light that's there? It only takes a little bit of light to make a big difference. One single candle, even in this darkened sanctuary, as big as it is, would bring comfort and assurance, would it not? Jesus is asking us to be guides for others, to help them find their way as we have found our way. It's not about wattage when it comes to being the light. It may only be a single flame that someone needs to start them on their way. Jesus initially wants us to be visible and present, not to hide our faith, and especially not to keep it to ourselves. Again, if you're going to be the light, there is something or someone you need to reveal to the world around you, and the world desperately needs you to do it. You saw the news last night, right? The world needs light. Show it with your actions, say it with your words, preferably at the same time. So the question is this: where can you shine this week? Where can you encourage others in the gospel? Where can you love others like Jesus has loved? These are the questions we keep at the top of our minds as we follow Jesus through life. Jesus said in verse 16, "In the same way, let your good deeds shine out for all to see, so that everyone will praise your heavenly Father." Simple enough, yes? Salt and light. Two distinguishing characteristics of those who follow the way. Author Robert Fulghum tells the story of one of his professors, a wise man whose name was Alexander Papaderos. At the last session of the last morning of a 2-week seminar on Greek culture, Dr. Papaderos turned and made the ritual gesture, "Are there any questions?" Quiet quilted the room. These 2 weeks had generated enough questions for a lifetime, but now there was only silence. "No questions?" Papaderos swept the room with his eyes. So I asked, "Dr. Papaderos, what is the meaning of life?" The usual laughter followed, and people stirred to go. Papaderos held up his hand and stilled the room, looked at me for a long time, asking with his eyes if I was serious, and seeing from my eyes that I was. "I will answer your question." Taking his wallet out of his hip pocket, he fished into a leather billfold and brought out a very small round mirror about the size of a quarter. And what he said went something like this: "When I was a small child during the war, we were very poor and we lived in a remote village. One day, on the road, I found broken pieces of a mirror. A German motorcycle had been wrecked in that place. I tried to find all the pieces and put them back together, but it was not possible, so I kept only the largest piece, this one, and by scratching it on a stone, I made it round. I began to play with it as a toy and became fascinated by the fact that I could reflect light into dark places where the sun would never shine, in deep holes and crevices and dark closets. It became a game for me to get light into the most inaccessible places I could find. I kept the little mirror, and as I went about my growing up, I would take it out in idle moments and continue the challenge of the game. As I became a man, I grew to understand that this was not just a child's game, but a metaphor for what I might do with my life. I came to understand that I am not the light or the source of the light, but light, truth, understanding, and knowledge is there, and it will only shine in many dark places if I reflect it. I am a fragment of a mirror whose whole design and shape I do not know. Nevertheless, with what I have, I can reflect light into the dark places of this world, into the black places in the hearts of men, and change some things in some people. Perhaps others may see and do likewise. This is what I am about. This is the meaning of life." Jesus said, "I am the light of the world." And as his followers, we are to be like that little mirror, reflecting the light of Christ into the dark corners of the world. That is the meaning of the Christian life. Let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. You and I are being asked to light the way. And the good news is that you don't have to generate the light yourself. You already have it within you. You already have him within you. You just need to reflect him to everyone. Be salt and be light and be a blessing. Amen.